In Unit 1B.II, we'll be discussing the topic of social cognition, which if you remember from the previous unit, Unit 1A, cognition is mental processing, thinking, memorizing, critical thinking, that kind of thing. So social cognition refers to how our current environment or situation can influence our thoughts, perceptions, or beliefs, and then therefore influence our behavior. In other words, a situation in which you are in affects your perception or belief about the situation, which in turn can influence how you will then behave in that situation. This is a significant unit, as the AP exam will typically ask multiple questions related to this section. But before we get too in-depth, we need to begin with some fundamental principles. Try to keep up, as we have a lot to cover. Person perception is a fundamental concept to social cognition. It is affecting us when we judge someone we just met based on their maturity, mannerisms, demeanor, posture, body language, hygiene, and/or looks. These judgments or perceptions of people typically impact how we behave around them or treat them. Inaccurate perceptions can lead us to form inaccurate and discriminatory impressions of others. For example, Jimmy arrives to class on the first day of school, smelly, sweaty, and looking disheveled. As a result, the teacher thinks Jimmy will be the lazy, smelly kid in the class. But could there be some other reason for Jimmy's first impressions? We'll see. The building blocks to person perception are called schemas. Schemas are mental representations or mental pictures that organizes information in our brain. Like when we think of a favorite sports team, we see their insignia in our head and associate it with positive memories. These natural occurring schemas, this is a natural occurring phenomenon in the brain. It helps us naturally organize information more efficiently. These schemas enable us to make faster judgments and decisions in daily life. For example, if I were to ask you to picture a dog in your head, you would probably think of some furry animal with a tail, long snout that barks. However, my schema for a dog might be a golden retriever, while your schema or mental representation for a dog is a chihuahua. So schemas are not universal, but are unique to each individual person. Because our focus for this unit is social psychology, we will be spotlighting social schemas. These are mental representations we have of individual people or groups. These representations for people enable us to make quick assumptions and generalizations of them, so if schemas are based on ignorance or lack of education, they can often lead to stereotypes. For example, when most people think of the KKK, an image like this typically pops into their head. Or when people think of neo-Nazis or skinheads, an image like this is likely to appear. When one thinks of the KKK or skinheads, very rarely do they think of someone like this. The reason for this is that the gentleman here has a much more professional appearance, which most people do not associate with the KKK. But in fact, this man, whose name is David Duke, he is a member of the White Nationalist Party, was a member of the Louisiana State House of Representatives, and also ran for president as a Democrat in 1988, and again as a Republican in 1992, and was the Grand Wizard for the Louisiana branch of the KKK. This may be difficult to process because his appearance challenges our social schema for white supremacists. Another concept that is not found in the text, but is emphasized on the AP exam, and that also supports person perception, is the self-fulfilling prophecy. This is when our perceptions of ourselves or others impact our expectations, which directs our behavior, which ends up confirming those expectations. Like when someone throws a rock at you, you expect it to hit you if you don't move, so you move, which is behavior. Remember, acting is behaving. So the self-fulfilling prophecy is the same effect, but applied to social interactions. For example, let's say I truly believe that girls are naturally harder workers than boys. I believe this is a universal truth, that all females that ever lived and ever will live have more ambition and a greater drive for success than males. Because of this expectation, I, as your teacher, challenge my female students to learn the depths and intricacies of the science that is psychology through analysis and exploration, while then simply instructing my male students to work on effortless worksheets all day. Who do you think is more likely, then, to score a 5 on the AP exam? Lauren? Or David? That is right. Lauren is more likely to get the 5 because I challenged her to expand the depth of her knowledge. David, on the other hand, did not receive the same quality education. David's poor performance confirmed my expectation that he was not hardworking enough to learn the material. However, the actual cause for David's failure was mine for not challenging him. It was not totally the fault of David himself. Or was it? Class debate, anyone? Okay, moving on. As we have learned so far, the subject of social cognition incorporates the concepts of person perception, facilitated by social schemas, and the self-fulfilling prophecy. However, the most significant concept pertaining to social cognition is the attribution process as developed by Dr. Fritz Heider. The attribution process was a revolutionary theory for its time, providing further insight into how people explain or attribute others' behavior. Heider simplified these attributions to either being internal in origin, like personality traits, disposition linked to genetics from parents, motives, and attitudes, or external in origin, like situational pressures, social norms, peer pressure, and random chance. In short, the attribution process explains how we attribute other people's behavior to either their personality or to the situation in which they are in at that time. An example of the attribution process at work is the self-serving bias. This is the biased belief that one's success reflects personal ability and effort while attributing their own failures to situational factors. For example, if Jim makes a 97 on the first unit exam of the year, he is likely to attribute his success to his own effort and intelligence. However, if he was to bomb the first exam of the year, it is likely he would blame his failure on the fact that it was the first test and he did not know yet what to expect from an AP psychology exam, or that the room was too hot and there were distracting noises that diverted his concentration. Maybe Jim had valid concerns, and he was not truly prepared for the exam. Still, though, is he not to blame for his performance regardless of whether it results in success or failure? Clearly, mistakes can be made when making assumptions as to the cause of one's behavior. No concept explains this better than the fundamental attribution error. This is when we underestimate the power of the situation and overestimate the impact of personal disposition on one's behavior. This can oftentimes lead to misperceptions. For example, if Sarah is shifty, stutters, and fails to make eye contact during a job interview, her prospective employer may assume she is shy or timid and will not hire her as a result. However, the employer failed to realize that this was Sarah's first big job interview out of college. She was incredibly nervous, which affected her performance at the interview. Because of her skills and expertise, Sarah would later go on to excel in her profession thanks to another employer who did not fall victim to the attribution error and recognized Sarah's talents and abilities. Or if you remember Jimmy from the beginning of this presentation, Jimmy, the teacher would probably perceive Jimmy as being sweaty, nasty, lazy student on the first day of school. However, the teacher fails to recognize that his car might have broken down on the way to school and he had to run all the way from MacArthur to Coppell High School. Man, that'd be terrible. Another way people can develop false interpretations is through the actor-observer bias. This is pretty much the opposite of the fundamental attribution error, where the tendency is to attribute one's own actions or behaviors to external causes, while attributing other people's behaviors to internal causes. This is typically a way for people to cope with their own failure. For example, the reason I failed the test is because the room was too hot and the color of the paper was distracting me. But the reason Ian failed the test is because he's just a big dummy. In that example, I blamed my failure on external causes and another person's failure on internal causes to make myself feel better about my poor performance. Sometimes people need to believe one will get what one deserves so strongly that they will rationalize an injustice by naming things the victim might have done to deserve it. This is known as the just world phenomenon. Unfortunately, this is the case sometimes in matters of sexual assault. The victim may be blamed for the assault because of the revealing clothing she was wearing or because of her bad reputation. Despite all those things, even if they are true, sexual assault is inexcusable and should not be tolerated by society. However, the perpetrator may use the just world phenomenon to justify his actions in his own mind to subconsciously cope with the assault he committed. Oftentimes, just world phenomenon is used to rationalize less extreme scenarios, like the problems facing the homeless. Some people justify their lack of sympathy for the homeless with the attitude that they deserve to be homeless because of their lack of education or lack of effort in finding a job. And this concludes our unit for the day. We're going to watch some awesome YouTube videos and have a really good activity to follow up on some of these concepts. So come to class prepared.